Good evening and welcome to a special edition of KOMU 8 News, a streaming edition. Tonight, I'm Emily Spain. Thanks for joining us. We are partnering with the Colombia, Missourian and Vidwest studios this evening to bring you a forum between candidates running for the City Council here in Colombia. We are streaming live from the Vidwest studios in Colombia, and we want to welcome all of our viewers joining us on our various streaming platforms. And tonight we're focusing on two open seats on the Colombia City Council for Ward 3 and Ward 4, so let's meet tonight's candidates. Running for Ward 3 is Roy Lovelady. Roy, thanks for being here tonight with us.
Thank you for having me.
You own 360 Star Styling Studio. You're also the founder of the People's Defense. That's a local organization with a mission to lift diverse voices within our community and also address the separation between local government and its community. Roy, thank you for being here. Hoping to win re-election in the 3rd Ward is Mr. Carl Scala, who has served 4 terms on the council so far, also currently Mayor Pro Tem. And Scala was also the Vice Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Carl, thanks for being here.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now to the 4th Ward, Nick Foster is joining us tonight, and you've worked as an executive director at the Voluntary Action Center in Colombia for more than 9 years. Nick, thanks for being here.
Retired in 2020.
There you go.
There you go.
Erica Pefferman, finally, our final candidate, also vying for the 4th Ward seat. Erica is the owner of Colombia Marketing Group and KOMU Magazine. Erica, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
So here's how tonight will work. I'll pose a question to all of the candidates, and we're going in alphabetical order tonight. You'll have a minute to respond, so please try to keep your response to that minute, and you'll hear a little beep towards the end of the question. And we'll have final say on when to move on to the next topic. And we have a producer helping keep time, and you guys all see the monitor in the room as well. So let's get started with our first question tonight. We want to learn a little bit more about you and why you think this place we call home is so special. So Roy, we'll begin with you. What makes Colombia special to you, and how would you work to make sure that the things that you cherish about this city stick around?
So what makes Colombia special to me is, for one, this is my home. I've been here since I was 13 years of age. While being here, I've had the opportunity to network, communicate, start a business, graduate, move away, come back. What I would do and what I cherish about Colombia is the people. I'm very active with the people. I love hearing what they say. I love going out and attacking missions to make people's lives better, which is part of the reason why I even want to run for council. So Colombia is home to me, and my mission is to see it thrive. I've went through several processes where I've started at the bottom and I worked my way to the top, and I want to be exemplary for people who look like me, for people from the LGBTQIA background, just a diverse group of people in which I represent. So Colombia is home to me, just like it's home to others, and I stand for the people.
Okay, Roy, thank you. Carl, what about for you?
Yeah, I've lived here for about 42 years now. I came here to go to graduate school at MU and finished graduate school here, and then worked for the university quite a long time, for many years before I picked up this avocation that we call politics with the city council. So I think what makes this a very special place is the people, obviously. I agree with Roy about that. But it's also the culture and the diversity of the culture. Being a college town means that there was lots of drama and music, and drama in the best sense. There is also some drama in politics, but there is lots of opportunities to not only develop yourself, but watch other folks develop. And as a psychologist, I've always been appreciative of small group dynamics and the work that goes on with local governance.
Okay, thank you. Nick.
Well, we moved here in 2010. We came here when my wife took a position at the University of Missouri, teaching in the College of Education and now Human Development. I was looking for an opportunity to stay in nonprofit work, and finally ended up at Voluntary Action Center. While I was at VAC, I came to appreciate so many things about the city. VAC provides a lot of different services, and because of that, it put me in touch with a lot of different people in the community, in nonprofits to be sure, but in the for-profit community, in education, in service organizations, and politics, the government. I had to make application to the city for funding as well as others. But before we moved here, we were living someplace we really liked a lot, and we were sad to leave where we were living. But I can remember being here very vividly. My wife and daughter and I sat in almost the same spot just yesterday eating lunch outside Glenn's Cafe, my wife and I have been out to eat, and we were on that boulevard between the two columns on either end, the sets of columns on either end. Oh, and I said, this is our town, and it has been ever since for so many good reasons.
Okay, thank you. Erica, what about for you?
I love this question. I'm in love with our city. Both my businesses are named after our city. I moved here in 2005 from Joplin, and my children were very young at the time, and I have 5 kids, 23 to 14, and the oldest were going to school at the time, which was Lee Expressive Arts, and now is Locust Street. And there were 23 different languages spoken in that building. And I was just overwhelmed and just in love with the diversity that our city had, the independent restaurants, the district. We had live music, there was theater, there were museums, there was just anywhere that you looked, the sports at the university. I was able to find what I wanted for my children and an environment to raise them in without having to move to Kansas City or St. Louis or even a bigger city than that. So to me, I think Columbia is amazing, and I get to write about it every month in the magazine. So there's never a shortage of things to love about the city.
Awesome. Thank you all for your answers to that question. Let's dive into a more serious topic here and move our attention to crime in our city. Frequently, we heard the discussion focusing on crime in the downtown area late at night. What is your understanding of the crime situation in Columbia, and how would you address it? And does your concept include the idea of community policing? And Carl, will begin this round with you.
Wish I had more than a minute to talk.
I know.
But yes, since I first was elected in 2007, the number of police officers has increased 18%. The number of firefighters has increased to about 13%. I often tell the story of a very successful pilot program that we initiated a few years back with a different administration, different city manager, and that is there were 3 underserved areas. Eventually they were expanded to 4. In the first ward, the second ward, and there were 2 that were put in the third ward. And we sent social workers around to knock on doors to see what people needed and to see what people wanted. And what they returned back, the conversations that we had really talked about simple solutions that weren't very expensive, street lights and sidewalks, those kinds of things. That program was discontinued, unfortunately, by a previous administration, and I regret that because the violence rates and the policing rates in those areas went down by 20%. It was a very successful program.
Okay, Carl, thank you. Nick, what about for you?
Everyone in the city, wherever they live and wherever they work, needs to feel that they're safe where they are. I recently talked with a gentleman who works downtown, he told me, and I asked him what his primary concern about the city was, and he mentioned crime. He said that he's worked downtown for about 17 years, and now he's afraid to leave late at night from his place of work. So we do have an issue, but I think that along with community policing, which I support, we need to address the root issues that lead to crime. We've got to address poverty in our city. We've got to address the issues that keep some people from being able to access all of the opportunities that all of us want to. So adequate income, addressing homelessness, because that is also a contributing factor to it. So I think that's at the root of it. We want to go to, we need to get to a place where we stop pulling people out of the river, as Desmond Tutu once said, and go back upriver and find out why they're falling in.
Okay. Erica.
Absolutely. The answer to your question is, I think there's no other way than to have a robust community-oriented policing policy and having our officers have the time and the bandwidth to develop relationships within the communities, the different communities within our community. They're not able to do that right now. They're short-staffed, drastically so. We've lost 10 police officers since January. We are underpaying them for what the market tells us that they need to be paid. And they make less than any of the law enforcement agencies around us. They're doing required 12-hour shifts at minimum, and they're tired. So when we ask them to invest time getting to know people, that is a process that takes a minute. So we have to have enough officers that have enough time to get out of their cars and talk to neighbors and speak to people. And we can't do that under our current pay structure with the compression that's in place with where it is. So we have to be very innovative when it comes to recruitment and retention with our officers, and we need to make sure they have the resources that they need. And that includes time and training and money.
Okay. Roy.
Okay, so when I heard this question, I heard you ask about crime downtown, community policing, and basically how would we fix it. So first I will say that crime is happening everywhere inside of the city of Columbia. I would like the urgency that they used when putting those lights downtown and addressing crime downtown throughout 3rd Ward and other wards, because crime is everywhere and we have a crime problem, so it needs to be addressed. Community policing, yes, I would love to see community policing implemented throughout the city. Now, when talking with Chief Jones said that community policing is just good policing. Well, sometimes I think that taking a guardianship approach to policing versus a militant approach to policing would be great. So community policing would definitely be a plus. I understand that we're short-staffed. I understand that there's a trust gap between the citizens of Columbia and the police. So there's a lot of work to be done in order to fix the crime issues.
Okay, all right, thank you. Nick, you kind of brought up our next question here. We're going to talk about the issue of homelessness within Columbia that we're talking a lot about recently, especially some of the activism and support that's been shown in direct asking the city for more support, like a homeless resource center, use of city buildings, of course, for those overnight warming centers and additional staff. What do you think is the appropriate role for the city regarding our homeless population? And Nick, this question begins with you.
Well, I've been working on this issue for a long, long time, and especially did while I was at VAC. There are a number of things that the city can do. One thing that I was recently pleased about was the city stepped up and provided a place for a room at the inn to extend the weeks that they'll be able to be open, because we're still going to have some cold nights. Tomorrow is going to be one of those, as a matter of fact. So the city has opened the event center for room at the inn, and I was out there yesterday, and it's amazing how much space there is there. It's a great place for it. So I think what that indicated was some initiative on the part of the city to meet a need that is immediate. And it says that there are immediate needs that can be met, and the city can do that. Beyond that, the city can convene, can help support financially, but also by helping to guide the efforts that are going on. That's already happening. There's a lot of work that's being done cooperatively among all the agencies who are doing this. I'm grateful that there's a lot of interest in this right now, and I think we have some great opportunities immediately ahead of us to significantly address issues related to homelessness.
Okay, Erica.
So the interesting thing about when you ask about homelessness and mental health and poverty and workforce development, these things are all connected. None of them live in a vacuum by themselves. And so the thing about homelessness, I feel that the city, the role that we play is, I feel that this is a perfect opportunity for our public-private partnerships. So the city can finance structures, opportunities for people to have places to go, but then offer those opportunities to manage them to the nonprofits that have the experience, the ability, the systems, the processes in place to be able to do so efficiently and effectively. But you can't just solve homeless. People that are homeless often also fight addiction, also have mental health challenges. So the Mental Health Crisis Center, I feel, is also a very important investment to put alongside a homeless center. And so when you look at these things, you have to look at them holistically. What are all the reasons why someone might find themselves, them or their family, homeless, and address all of that.
Okay. Roy.
Okay, so one thing my mother used to say is, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so if our homeless population is our weakest link, not saying that they are, don't get me behind that statement, then we need to reach out and help. How could the city help? I think that they need to communicate and have robust conversations with a lot of people who are already doing the work. As Nick and Erica both already said, there are a lot of people out there getting the ball rolling. That's how it ended up a topic of conversation right now that we're talking about. So we definitely need to communicate more with the non-for-profits, the private sectors, the people out doing the work, the grassroots organizations. Bring them all together. Let's create a robust conversation. One thing that's missing that I've noticed no matter where I've been in government, in non-for-profits, is the voice of the people who are unhoused. We need to hear those voices, so we need to make them feel comfortable in spaces so that they can trust and then give their true opinion about how to help them.
Okay. Carl.
I think generally speaking, it sounds like we're in agreement here. I mean, the city's role and responsibility is as a convener It's also to defer to the private sector, that is the nonprofits, because that's where the expertise is. I think any of the candidates here, if they are successful, will also find out that it can tend to be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to follow some of the advice of the boards and commissions. For example, with respect to the Wabash Warming Center, there was some of us decided that we wanted to try and raise that temperature level to 32 degrees and have expanded hours and so on. But the way that the council decided that issue was to increase it to 25 degrees and have the cutoff for March 12th. Fortunately, the city manager decided to extend that with the measures that you decided, or that you talked about, Nick, and that was obviously a very good thing. But there you go.
Let's talk a little bit about those federal ARPA funds that the city is still deciding what to do with. No firm decision yet on how to spend those beyond establishing 4 categories for $12.5 million of the funds and a public engagement process for the rest of the $12.5 million. If elected, what would you do with the ARPA funding? And Erica, this question begins with you.
I always think this is an interesting question, because the decision is, made by council and agreed upon by priorities that are directed by the budget. With the ARPA funds, we have an opportunity to do something extremely rare. The rare is it that we have such a large nest egg given to us to do whatever we want with. I often think about the Armory that's sitting downtown, where this same type of situation happened, and we have a building that decades and decades later is being used for children and lots of activities all of the time that the community uses. I very much want to see us use ARPA funds for things that are sustainable, that will be here providing services, whether it's the Mental Health Crisis Center, the homeless shelter, things that will be here for us for decades from now, so that whatever it is that we invest our money in has a sustainable footprint that we can see that really served all citizens of Columbia rather than just a few.
Is there anything specific that you had in mind?
Yeah, I wrote about this month in my publisher's letter for my magazine. I think the Mental Health Crisis Center has to be funded. I'd love to see the facilities for the homeless be funded, ran by someone else, but the structure funded by the city. I think there are a lot of different opportunities for us to look into things that can happen. They are restricted to certain uses, so we have to look at what those are. But those are 2 that I think are extremely important.
Okay, Roy.
Thank you for this question. I have been a part of the coalitions, many coalitions, and many people who are talking about these ARPA funds. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if there never was a word ARPA, and what would people do if that money didn't exist. But since it does, there's inequities throughout the city of Columbia, and it was due to COVID. And that's what the money is for. So we need to address those issues in which the money said that it came for. There were a lot of businesses that went out of business. There were a lot of people who were unhoused, are still being unhoused. There is a lot of things happening behind COVID, and this was a relief from COVID. So I definitely would say I don't have any specific issues that I would like to address, but I would definitely like to engage in this robust conversation that has been asked for since the beginning of the ARPA funds, that was promised to the people, so that we can make direct actions in order to fix the inequities and the strife from COVID.
Okay, Carl.
Yeah, it's ironic that this was kind of a windfall, the ARPA funding, in view of the tragedy that was COVID. And it took a long time for the federal government to get around. As a matter of fact, just a few months ago, to really rewrite the rules to tell us what could be spent and what couldn't be spent. But the city council, and I was involved in this, decided to spend the first tranche of that $12.5 million, it's $25 million altogether, the first tranche of that $12.5 million for those 4 categories. And they importantly included homelessness and mental health and violence and workforce development. All of those things are transformative kinds of programs, and I don't really want to get into the debate about people versus projects, because I think there is sufficient funding to do both of those things, but I think we have a golden opportunity to invest in some of these transformative projects. And for the remaining tranche of the money, we've decided to have a very open public engagement process to deal with the other needs that the community has.
Okay. Nick.
Well, the way you put the question, it sounds like, what would I do with that money? Would that it were up to me. That would be a lot of fun, I think. But it would also be an incredible challenge, which I think the City Council has discovered, and the city has discovered. You know, sometimes it's something of a tragedy to receive so much money because everybody wants it, and everybody wants to get a part of it, and everyone has strong feelings about how it can be used. So when the pandemic began, I had the thought that always occurs to me whenever there's a natural disaster. The people that are going to suffer the most through this pandemic are going to be the people who are already struggling the most, and that is true. So I think that when we look at the ARPA money, we need to keep that uppermost in mind. So I support fully the decisions that the council has made about these things that they've already determined the money will go to. But I'm especially glad that there's going to be a public process to follow up on that so that the public has an opportunity to fully speak their own concerns about it, because this is something generally that the city needs to give attention to, I think. And in this case, we have an opportunity to do it that way.
Okay, so another thing that a lot of people like to talk about is trash here in our city, and we seem to be unable to come up with a solution that seems to please everyone. So what would your you could talk about that, Carl, here. Yes. So from roll carts to recycling, what, if any, solution do you think there could be to dealing with trash here in Colombia? And I think, Roy, it's your turn to go first.
Yes. Okay. So I've had the opportunity to look at some data, and that data shows that several other cities around Colombia are doing different things. Some are doing roll carts, some are still doing the pay as you throw, which we are doing. But one thing that I noticed about Kansas City, and this data was provided from the city, so it's public knowledge, it's public data. It was offered to or provided to the city council as well. So one thing that Kansas City is doing is no base pay. And you're allowing you to put out any trash bags that you like, and you get 2 for free, and then you pay $1.25 for the tags to attach to the rest of the bags. I think that would be a great option for the upcoming months until that it's addressed on the ballot, or however the city council addresses it, and then it's put the ballot or whatever happens from there. But I definitely think that we need to change the trash immediately, and then we need to have this little timer.
Go ahead and finish your thought, Roy.
Okay, so I think that we definitely need to involve the community in a part of this process, as well as the trash the workers. And we understand that the solid waste is a valid part, and we understand that why it changed, and the big pickup items, which led to a lot of workman's comp claims. I think allowing that one to be put out for free and then charging for the other bigger pickup items is a great idea. And we don't want to keep putting trash bags inside of trash bags and putting more plastic into the landfills.
Okay, thank you. Carl.
Well, we're on the verge of a solution. It's not going to please everybody, but we will have a decision as to whether or not the City Council chooses to take the ordinance out of the Code of Ordinances or defers to the public to have a public referendum to decide this. My preference is the latter, and I say that because I don't want to disenfranchise the folks that were in the majority by about 8 points in 2016 that voted to ban roll carts. I'm agnostic about this. I could go either way, and I'd be happy with either system. I think the system that you're referring to, Roy, can have some problems in it, because that was the purpose of having heavier quality bags. Now we can get into the argument about what the quality of the bags, and that was a private sector failure, and frankly a city council failure not to hold them accountable for their delivery and their bags and so on and so forth. But I think we are on the verge of this solution. We are going to have a private, if you will, a hybrid system. And in 2016, as a matter of fact, I was part of the conversation that suggested that before it ever went to a referendum. Unfortunately, in my ward, there were probably 80 or 90% of the folks that wanted to ban roll carts. And so it was incumbent on me to make sure that I represented the ward according to what they wanted to have done.
Okay, Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you ask any candidate who's involved in this process, they would love to say they would love to get to a point where we're not talking about trash anymore, because we constantly get this question, and there are a number of ways to approach it. I lived in a small town in Alabama for 13 and a half years where we had roll carts. I don't recall ever hearing anyone complain about them. So I think that's where I would like to get, whether or not it's roll carts. We want to get to a place where perhaps not everyone is going to be satisfied with the solution, but the great, great majority of the people do, and we're not having this conversation anymore. There is, by the way, I think they have been able to gather enough signatures to put this on the ballot, so we are going to have the opportunity to address it again. Roll carts I'm talking about. But I think this issue goes deeper than just the issue of trash, and it has to do with people in our community feeling confident about the city being able to solve a problem. But this is an opportunity, and we have an opportunity to address it in an effective way. And I think if we address it that way with that intention, then we have a chance for a real significant win here and a way to move forward not only on this but on other issues as well.
Okay, Erica.
Well, I think when the day comes that this goes on the ballot, we're going to have record turnout for voting. You know, we do hear about it a lot, and I think it has become a bit of a joke, you know, when we talk about, because everyone in the city really wants to talk about trash, when we really want to talk about crime or homelessness or things of that nature. The challenge to me is that this should be simpler. It should be more common sense. There should be a solution. Many cities have figured out how to deal with this, and we are smarter than this. And I think what I have figured out in my research and talking to people is that it comes down to the city council seems to have a trend of not listening to the staff and the recommendations that come from staff. When this particular issue was solved the last time, it seems to me from what I have heard from staff at the time is that they suggested a 5-bag limit and not providing bags, but the point being reduce trash in the landfill. And what happened was, it seemed to be, we went to this, which was even more minimized, plus having the branded logoed bags, which ended up having the quality control problems. So it just seems to be something that we really need to take a step back, identify what will work. There are enough smart people in the city to figure this out and move forward and explore every option on the table.
Speaking of a 30-second rebuttal here for Carl, I wanted to give you a chance to respond.
I heard this from you, Erica, at the last forum as well, and I was there, and there was no such 5-bag suggestion that ever came before the City Council. The suggestion was, with the system that we have now, and the reason it was put in place for 2 reasons. One, it was a pay-as-you-throw system, which also would be involved with roll carts. But it has reduced the amount of trash going into the landfill by about 20%, and it's increased recycling as well. So it's been somewhat successful. The problem, of course, was the private sector's failure with their contract to guarantee that they would distribute the bags and have them available.
Yeah. And a quick rebuttal from you,
Erica. Yeah, my office is downtown. I have an office right at 9th and right south of 9th and Broadway. And I think you would find a lot of business owners who pay for commercial trash to tell you that that is not actually the case, that the residential trash has not decreased. It has moved into commercial dumpsters that are located downtown and other places around the city. So we haven't